Welcome to Season 2 of the SOAR podcast, the place for creative entrepreneurs who want to build healthier, happier, more profitable self-employed businesses. I'm your host, Ray Hyde Cornell, business mentor at Chiron Consulting and CEO and senior copywriter at Cornell Content Marketing. Get ready to soar. Welcome to the SOAR podcast. Today, I have a fascinating guest with us, Dave Combs. Dave, tell our listeners what you do.
Well, basically, the latest thing that I do is to create music and promote it and try to spread it around the world, because my music is soft, soothing, relaxing kind of music, which I think the whole world needs more of these days to kind of calm down and be a little more peaceful. And of course, I have written a new book that we'll talk about later, but that's not the main purpose of the podcast. We want to talk about music and the way music touches people's lives. And so that's what I'm all about.
You are, when I first saw your story, when we first connected online, I was like, this is it. This is the guy who's living the dream. Because oftentimes when we get into thinking about freelancing and entrepreneurship, there's this artistic independence that comes with that dream of being your own self-employed creative and making a living from your art. And in my businesses, I do that through writing, but it has kind of a businessy tone to it, of course, because I'm in marketing. But for you, it is art at its purest form. How did you get started in this just lifestyle of making music, making a living from your music, and letting that be the entire stage of your life?
Well, I think I could probably divide this into two pieces.
Okay.
I wrote my first song, Rachel's song, which we'll talk about. I wrote the actual music in January of 1981, and I was 33 years old. So 33 and after, that's the part two. Part one of my life, I really look back and see that as a preparation for part two. So when I was, born and raised and grew up, and I'm from the East Tennessee part of the country. I guess you could call me a Tennessee hillbilly. You can probably tell from my accent I'm not from New York. But anyway, I grew up around music. My parents were both musical. They both played the piano. My father played by ear. My grandmother, Combs, she was born in 1894. She was a tiny little lady, about 4'8", but she could make some music. She was very musically inclined, and one of her favorite instruments, I have it right here. I don't know whether you recognize this or not, but
I've seen that before, but what is that called?
It's called an auto harp. And Mother Maybelle Carter, if you Google Maybelle Carter, she's I think, a cousin of Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash's wife was a Carter. So Johnny married into the Carter family. This is Mother Maybelle's favorite instrument. And this one exactly is my grandmother's instrument that when she passed away, I found a note in the case that came in that said, "This harp belongs to David Combs, Granny Estelle Combs." She signed it. So this became mine after she passed away. But before she passed away, every time I would go see Granny, she lived in southwestern Virginia on a farm. One of the first things she did was to hand me her auto harp and say, "David, would you tune up my auto harp for me?" And of course I would, and I'd get it all tuned up and then hand it back to her. And she would just sit that thing down on her lap, and she would just play it and make some music and sing. And I just, those are great memories I have.
Yeah.
So being around music and people who love music at church, I'm a Baptist, so at the Baptist church, music is a huge part of our service. And the choir music, the organ piano duets, all that, the quartets, solos, all the music was everywhere. So that was still is a big part of my life, that kind of music, choral music. And then, I took piano lessons. I learned how to play the piano. And of course, my father played by ear. And so I also kind of picked up the playing by ear part of it. So I can turn on the radio usually and I can play along with whatever's playing once I figure out what key they're in. So music was a huge part of the foundation of my life. Now, my technical, my career side, I'm a math major, physics minor, worked in the computer center for 4 years, computer programmer, IT, tech. I think like your husband and I could probably have long conversations about IT.
Oh, I'm sure.
My whole career was from out of college was in IT and everything technical. And that, ironically, also led me to be able to record my first song, because one of my jobs as an IT professional within Western Electric AT&T took me to Nashville, Tennessee on a long, I was working all week long there on a big project. And it was during that project that I basically took the first song that I wrote, called Rachel's Song, and got a demo recording made of it professionally in Nashville, Tennessee. Because as you know, Nashville is Music City, USA.
Yeah. That's the place to do it if you're going to do it.
That's right. And so that recording then was in 1986. And that then really launched my career toward the music side of things. Now, I was still working at AT&T at the time, so this was part-time at that point.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 1992 that I was able to quit my job at AT&T to do my music full-time. So this transition from part-time messing around with my music and then turning it into a business and trying to grow it, that was a span from 1981 to 1992, 11 years. So it's not a, snap your fingers kind of instant success. A lot of work. And I wrote up all these stories of this journey, which is a lot of connecting the dots and try things. That didn't work. Try something else. That didn't work. Now, this worked great. So it's the life of an entrepreneur is always one of trying things to see what works and what doesn't. Yeah. And it's no problem if you find something that doesn't work. You just found one way it doesn't work. So you just keep
information
going.
That's still a sign of direction. When you figure out what doesn't work for you, that's almost more valuable than finding the one thing that does, because it helps you narrow your focus.
Exactly. You have got that right. So that's kind of my two parts of my life. With the youth part of basically working with my the years up to age 33 with Western Electric technology, computers and factories. And I was a certified material requirements planning person. I did all the inventory control, production planning. I was APIC certified at the fellow level, for what that's worth now. And so that was my life during the day, and music was still there as an underpinning through all of that. So I have to look at those years as preparation for the life after I wrote Rachel's Song, which involved the creative side, which you just talked about, writing music, of which I've written over 120 songs and recorded over 170 with Gary Prim, the artist. And at the same time, I have, under the business side of it, I have my MBA from Wake Forest University. So that prepared me for all the business workings of a business, of managing your own business. And the experience with working at AT&T and all that prepared me for doing my own thing after I quit my job in 1992 with Western Electric, or AT&T, to do my music full time. So I really had a great, from until 1992, great preparation for running my own business from that point forward. So it wasn't one that I was really, shaking in the boots about doing this or whatever. I had felt that I had taken my time and had prepared myself adequately. And so we went at this thing deliberately and very methodically. And it grew and it grew, and it was a very successful music business with 15 albums. And now my music's been played millions of times around, and still played millions of times around the world, but on streaming media and downloads mainly.
Wow. So the thing that I find so fascinating about your story is that you went through this transition from corporate, the very technical world of employment, into being a self-employed artist at a time when this was not popular. Now we're in 2022, and that's the popular thing to do, especially since COVID. Being self-employed, being your own business owner, that has really taken off as a much more common and more understood way of life. But you did it at a time when your side hustle was supposed to stay a side hustle and just something that you did in the evenings after getting off the clock with your employer.
Mhm.
So, how did you know that that was the right path for you, given that that was very contrary to what was culturally popular at the time?
Well, you're right about the cultural part of it, because I guess it had probably been drilled into me as a young man. In fact, I remember my father telling me when I first told him about my job that I'd gotten at Western Electric, a Fortune 500 AT&T subsidiary company.
Yeah.
He said, "Now, Dave," he said, "you don't do like I did and jump around jobs." He said, you work at that company and you stay there and get your good retirement and all that stuff." So he was very dead set on me not not jumping around like today. The people would look back and laugh that if we stay at a company today 2 or 3 years, that's been a long time.
Right.
Back then you were expected to stay 30, 35, 40 years to get your retirement, and the benefits were good. Now I'm not poo-pooing that. They had a good retirement plan, good health care benefits, all those kind of things. But in today's world, boy, has that ever flipped.
Yeah.
We don't even have to go in the office now. We work virtually from home with Zoom or Teams or whatever you use. And you can work anywhere in the world, that as long as you got internet access, we can do most jobs from anywhere. Well, that wasn't the case back then. And so for me to make that decision culturally and within my own psyche, I had an internal conflict, I guess. I could probably still hear my father's voice saying, "Dave, don't do this. Don't you dare jump ship here." But on the other hand, I was getting feedback from my fans. My music was beginning to spread around the whole world, and I was getting fan mail from people. I got over 50,000 letters and notes from people. I'm 50,000. I mean, if you could see my basement full of boxes over here, I mean, there's a big moving boxes full of letters. And these are not just little little notes. They're pour their heart and soul out kind of notes that tell how the music touched their lives. And I remember the day that I decided that I was going to, I'm cutting it off. I'm going to quit, resign from my job. I was sitting in church one Sunday morning trying to expect, I was praying for some guidance, please send me some guidance.
Give me a sign.
Give me a sign, please.
Yeah.
And I think what I was looking for, this is funny, Ray, I think I was looking for a bolt of lightning or a clap of thunder or a burning bush or,
a huge stream of light coming in through the stained glass. Yeah.
Something dramatic. Come on, shine the light on me here, right? That wasn't the way it worked. And I was sitting there, and I remembered getting a letter that week from a fan. And the letter simply said, he didn't know me from anybody, and I didn't know him. I can't remember where it was from, but he said simply, "Dave Combs, making and writing music is what God put you on this planet to do." Signed his name. And I thought, And then I said to myself, I kind of chuckled to myself. I said, "Lord, you must think I am the densest Christian on the planet. Here I'm sitting trying to expect all this help from all the big stuff, and you've sent me 10,000 letters to tell me what to do, and I have been ignoring it." Yeah. So I said, okay. The next day, I turned my letter of resignation into my boss and haven't looked back. It was just an amazing transformation for me to realize that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Is there anything that now at this stage of your life, and you've had this wildly successful decades-long musical career of your own building, is there anything that you would tell your 30, you said 33, 34 was when you made that jump? 33, your 33-year-old self. Is there anything that you would tell your 33-year-old self, or even maybe earlier, to get on this path sooner?
That's the part that really puzzles me, is because why did it take me 33 years to write my first song? grew up around, like I said, grew up around music all my life, played music, sang. I actually was a choir director for many years. You know, I conducted other people's music. Why did it take me 33 years to write my first song? Maybe you have the answer. I really don't, except that I do know one thing. Nobody ever told me, Ray, that I could. Now, that may sound weird, but I can never recall anybody telling me, Dave Combs, you love music, you're great at music, you play a great piano, you like all this stuff. Why don't you write your own music?
Yeah.
Nobody ever told me that. And I'm thinking, what if somebody had, when I was 18 years old, let's say, Dave, why don't you write a song? You're good at making stuff up. Write a song. And what if I had? I don't know what would have happened, but there's all those years went by, and maybe it's just I wasn't ready. Maybe I wasn't ready until I was 33. I don't know.
And that's one of those things where, as much as we would idealistically like to think that we are so self-empowered and so independent, we often look for external validation, that permission to say, you can do this. And that's really the entire premise of this show is I want to show people what's possible so that they can never tell themselves that their dreams are impossible, because you are doing exactly that. But even you, who has had this wildly successful musical career, needed that turning point of permission, of somebody saying, you can do this, you're that good. And so on that note, we're going to take a super short break. And when we come back, I have a few more questions to ask you about this dance that you do between the business and the artistic life that you lead. So we'll be right back. Hey, this is Ray. Ready to build a business that supports a life you love, a life you've always dreamed of? It's time to stop passively dealing with what's right in front of you and start deliberately designing your own future. That's exactly what we do in private business mentoring. You and I work together to create a completely custom to you business model that gives you everything you want and need while protecting you from stress and burnout. Ready to get started? Go to chironconsulting.us/mentoring to learn more. There you can also book a free call with me so we can start getting to know each other and see if mentoring is right for you. Plus, I love working with early stage entrepreneurs. That's why my mentoring packages are priced so low. I want you to soar. So don't worry about having to shell out thousands of dollars. Not here. Just go to chironconsulting.us/mentoring to learn more. We are back with Dave Combs, the masterful musician who now has, 15 albums and 170 songs that you've recorded. And this is, as I said at the beginning of the show, you really are living kind of like that artistic rebel's dream of making a living from your artwork. And yet you also are a very savvy businessman. And you mentioned that your career, your traditional career leading up to you handing in your resignation and going full-time into your musical business, that really prepared you for everything that has come since then. How do you do that now? How do you marry the artistic side of things with the business side of things? Like, oh yeah, I still have to pay a mortgage and I still have to have health insurance and I still have to have income and I have to do marketing and all those things that are not so artistic.
Well, I think it's the standard life of an entrepreneur, especially an entrepreneur that's a one person show, let's say.
Yes.
You find that you have about 15 hats you have to wear. You have the creative side where you've got to have your product or your service, whatever it is that you basically offer to the public that's going to pay you money for, that really generates the income. But the under the business side of things, where you got to pay taxes, you got to get all your any kind of permits or any licenses, whatever it is that you have to do to run the business. Yeah. And if you're a fairly bigger business, you may have one or more employees that you've got to keep up. You got to make payroll. You've got to keep up with time and all this kind of thing. You have to all of the health insurance, all of the aspects of a business. So you wear a lot of hats. And what you find is that as an entrepreneur, there is no, that's not my job kind of, those words will never come out of your mouth because everything is your job. And sometimes that can be bogging down. And if you let it, sometimes the minutia of the job, or some people call it ministrivia, all the busyness of business can distract from so much from your creative side of it that the creative side suffers, and your business might even fail for lack of that. You can't spend all of your time doing non-productive things. And by productive, I mean creating products, like in my case, writing music, producing albums, or doing piano music books. I have 11 piano music books that I've published as well, because piano players want to play my music.
Yeah.
So you're always thinking about products to create, ways to improve the products that you already have. But then on the other side, you're always trying to manage the actual operations of your business and keep up with the finances of your business, all the bookkeeping, all the record keeping, so that your taxes are paid properly and all that kind of thing. So you have to wear a lot of hats.
Exactly. And do you have any boundaries or systems or routines in place where, maybe I'm probably making things up here, but maybe on certain days, all you have to do is be creative and let inspiration strike. And then maybe Mondays are the days that you do all your bookkeeping and your admin stuff. Or how do you strike that balance so you have the creative freedom to do your most important work, which is actually creating the music?
Well, my wife would probably tell you that that's the part where I come up pretty short on, because I am not a very structured, by the calendar, same daily routine, everything that's the same every day kind of thing. I'm pretty spontaneous, and if I'm in the mood to sit down at the piano, I'll sit down at the piano and play. And if I want to go play a round of golf, I can do that too. Or I love to play table tennis. I like to do that. I like to shoot pool. I like to go on bicycle rides, and I like to just sit. I like to read. I love reading other people's books, and that's another thing that I really want to emphasize to the younger entrepreneurs, that you need to get yourself a library of books that I think are going to be great food for your brain, for your mind. I started myself out, and as did my wife, Linda, a book like this, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yep,
You may have read that.
Too, yeah.
Everybody's heard of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes, sir.
And here's another one, The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale. I got to hear him preach one time in New York City. And his little publication that he started, that you may recall, is Guidepost Magazine. That was a Norman Vincent Peale creation, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
I got an article published in Guidepost Magazine in 1994, and it's called Two-Part Harmony. And that's me sitting at the piano. It was like a 2- or 3-page article, and it was the story that I'm telling about writing Rachel's song, and how I was able to build my business up to the point where I was able to resign my job at AT&T and do my music full time. Yeah. That little article in 1994 generated over 10,000 responses immediately. In 2 weeks' time, I had to hire 2 people to answer the telephone. Wow. And my mailman started bringing my mail, dragging it down the driveway in a canvas bag, like 50 pounds worth of mail every day. Wow. 10,000 people just like that. And so you have to prepare yourself for those kind of things, though. But I think as you're young and trying to figure out how to get your head around where you want to go, study and spend time learning from the masters. These people have spent their careers, like I'm sure you have, finding out what are the, not shortcuts, but at least what are the techniques, the founding principles of success. In fact, you probably have this book by my friend Jack Canfield.
I actually don't have that one. Oh, I'm going to write that one down. So is this The Success Principles, How to Get from Where You Are to Where You Want to Be by Jack Canfield.
Yes.
We will put that in the show notes for people as well.
Yes. Now, Jack is a friend of mine now. He and I connected up a year and a half ago, coming up on 2 years, and we became fast friends. He loved my music. He was very encouraging about my book that I was writing. He loved my stories. And I said, well, Jack, if I write the book, will you write the foreword to it? He chuckled. He says, well, Dave, you write it first and we'll see.
I want to see proof of concept first.
Yeah, I've got to see the proof of concept here. Well, I did, and I sent him the manuscript, and he loved it. And of course, on my book, at the top of the book, you'll see "Forward" by Jack Canfield.
Yeah.
So he has been a huge supporter. I love the man. He is just, this book that I showed you a minute ago is like a PhD in success. If you want to know all the principles, he has spent, I cannot believe how much effort and time he spent putting that book together. When you get your book, and I'm sure you will, you'll be amazed at the amount of work that went into that and the principles that he outlines and describes so eloquently in there. And I believe if somebody follows these principles, you will be successful. There is no doubt in my mind. So,
But that's really the key, is you have to be open to learning from people who've walked the
yes,
walk before you. And, with your work in particular, because it is so purely artistic, I want to go back to what you said earlier, where sometimes you're in the mood to write a new song or to play the piano. What happens when you're not in the mood? Do you still, at this stage of your business, put pressure on yourself to kind of force that creative process?
not exactly. Perhaps when I was earlier in my life cycle of my business, with 15 albums now, my efforts mainly these days are not so much creating music as trying to spread around the music that I already have.
Right.
Yeah, my music's been heard by millions of people, but there are billions of people who have not heard my music. So my main job now is to spread the word through venues like this and podcasts about my music, so that people that have never heard Rachel's song or heard of any of my music will find it, and hopefully it will touch and bless their lives as well. So I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to think about sitting down to write new music, although I am very curious, and I'm trying to analyze how this happens. How does a person like me, who is mainly usually a left brain person, I'm usually very analytical, 1, 2, 3 kind of left brain. The right brain is where all the creativity comes out. So, and I know from my personal experience how that happens for me is when I sit down at my piano. For somehow or another, there's a switch that goes, and I go from left brain to right brain. And when I'm playing music and listening to music, I'm in that creative right brain mode of tuning out the rest of the analytical part. I'm not thinking about, I'm thinking of music, but not about music. I don't think about, I'm playing a C, E, and a G, or all the notes. I just play a chord, and I like what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So how do I flip that switch from analytical to creative is something I'm really interested in, and I'm going to be speaking next week with a gentleman who's a doctor that's his expertise, is about the cranial, the nerves and the vagus nerve, and how all that drives the whole body, and how you go from one mood or mode to another. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But it's something I don't spend a lot of time fretting over at this point, because I've already got 170 songs, and the world has changed. Used to I sold cassette tapes and then CDs, and then it went to downloads, and then it went to streaming. Today we're in the streaming world, where you can just speak and say, hey, so-and-so, play Rachel's song by Gary Prim, the artist. And sure enough, on your little box, your speaker or whatever, here will come the music, just like that. So the world has changed. And so, but my main focus is to appear on podcasts and any media that I can get invited into to promote the listening to my music, because I know from the anecdotal feedback that I've gotten from over 50,000 people that it does affect people's lives in a positive and meaningful way.
Yeah. And I think there are some creative endeavors that have a similar trajectory as yours. So painters, photographers, musicians, you build up your body of work first, and then you spend a large portion of your career really promoting your work. Whereas other creatives, especially in the digital arena, like, freelance writers, copywriters, social media managers, designers, it's a constant reputation building so that you can produce the work. It's almost the other way around. So what advice do you have for those artists who are in that early stage of building their body of work, whether it is painting or photography or cartoonism or music, what advice do you have for focusing on that stage of building the body of work and maybe setting things that they might think are really important, like getting on all the podcasts and doing all of that for later down the road?
Well, one piece of advice that I would really give is that don't try to do everything yourself, even the creative part of it. Like for example, in my music, I wrote the music. I'm the songwriter, but I basically found and hooked up with Gary Prim, who's a session musician, a piano player in Nashville, Tennessee. That's his specialty. You hand him a piece of music, a new song, and as long as it's laid out where he can see what it's all about, in no time flat, he can come up with an unbelievable arrangement of that music. That's just his thing. If you ask anybody in Nashville, Tennessee, do you know Gary Prim, the piano player or the studio musician? All of them will say, oh yeah, we love Gary Prim. And I'm talking about people from Dolly Parton to Alan Jackson to all Ricky Scott, all the famous musicians in Nashville. They all know Gary, because if they want a keyboard player, Gary Prim is probably one of the prime ones to go to. And that's
so
just his.
Is there ego wrapped up in that? Because I would think as a musician, I'm an extremely amateur violin player. I used to play the piano, I used to play the drums when I was a kid. So I'm nowhere near anywhere where anybody would want to sit and listen to me. But I would expect that if this is your craft, that there's some ego, some ownership of the sound where it might seem strange to have someone else playing your music.
To me, it was, I was so pleased and blown away with the quality of what he produced from my simple song that I came up with, that we trusted each other. I knew that I did not have to conceive of all the orchestration and the arrangement of the song. As long as the song had a basic structure that was good and the chord progression was good, and as long as I could make it sound halfway decent on the piano, I knew that he could take it to the next 5 levels up. It was just an incredible journey. And I trusted him to do that. And that's the advice that I give people who are in the creative business, is to build your team around you that will complement whatever your strengths are and fill in those blanks where you're not so strong. Whether, if I can write a song, Gary can take that song and arrange it, and then there's the engineer in the studio, Ronnie Light, my engineer. He is a genius at taking all the mixing of the songs and making it sound fantastic. And then there are people to help you with the design of your product. Maybe you don't want to spend time creating the cover of your CD or the cover of your book. If you write a book, you got to have a cover. There are people that's all they do, is do cover design, as you know, like the logos behind you. They're the one that the Cornell content marketing with the crow sitting there, or not the crow, it's Raven. The Raven. Yes. And on there over here, the Chiron. Somebody came up with the nice idea with the bow and arrow. Yeah. So I don't know whether you came up with that or not, but
always a team effort, to your point, and it's really about finding the people who are going to honor your original thought and your original work. And then, as you said, take it to that next level, that 5th level, and amplify your original idea while keeping the integrity of the artistic input that you had to begin with.
Yep. So that teamwork aspect of it is extremely critical, especially in the early stages. And as you grow, then you're going to need to possibly hire people around you to help you do various things. Yeah, that's just part of the growth of any small business.
Yeah, we have time for one more question. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, there's kind of this fine line, I think, between when you have a hobby and letting it stay a hobby, something that is maybe just for your enjoyment, just for your personal development, just for your stress relief, or taking that hobby as you did and turning it into a career. Now, I'll use my husband as an example because he's kind of in this riding the fence place of he loves to do woodworking, but he's worried that if he goes all in on doing woodworking as a career, he may not enjoy it if he feels like he has to do it 7 days a week, 5 days a week, to pay the bills. What's your take on hobby versus career-a-fying your hobby?
Well, it really depends on how much fun and enjoyment you get out of your quote hobby. I know of some people who basically the jobs that they do, they enjoy so much that they say, I would work here if they didn't even pay me because I enjoy it that much. Now, that's the kind of position or job or entrepreneurial position you want to put yourself in. You want to put yourself in a position that if you didn't make a nickel at it, you would still enjoy making that piece of furniture or whatever it is that your husband makes out of wood. And I also love woodworking as well. I love making things, whether it's wood or anything. Basically, I'm a kind of a tactile. I like sculpting. I've taken some sculpting lessons. I like doing things with my hands. And but if you can enjoy what you're doing, I think I don't believe you'll have to worry about the fact that you think you might burn out on having to do it now to make a living. If you're doing something and it's successful and people are really demanding more of your product than actually you can produce, kind of thing, that is such a motivator to me. It's not just the money part of it, is the enjoyment that you see when your customers give you feedback that says, man, I really love this music, or I love this piece of whatever it is that you made me out of wood, and you get that wonderful feedback back. You're not going to burn out on that. As long as you get that kind of positive feedback, you don't have that to worry about.
And going back to the beginning of your story, that really is your sign from the universe. That's your sign from God saying, this is what you're meant to do. And so on that note, where can people check you out and learn more about what you're doing with your book and your albums and your what do you call them? The music lesson books? Is that what they're
The
called?
books, the piano music, the piano
Music.
books.
Yes. Where can people check you out and find all of those things?
Well, I've made it very simple. If you could remember my last name, Combs, Combs, it's just combsmusic.com. And on my homepage of my website, it's very simple. On the left-hand side of the page, you'll see a picture of the cover of my book. And right underneath it, we'll say, buy from Amazon. Buy now from Amazon.
Couldn't be simpler. I love it.
And then when you click on that, it will take you right to my books page on Amazon. And Amazon has a great way of displaying books. You can do it. There's a look inside. You can actually read the first 2 chapters of my book right on that Amazon page. There's an audio book version of my book that you can buy, and I'm the one reading it to you. If you want to hear me read my book to you, I'll be happy to for 8 hours. It takes 8 hours to read it. And then I have an ebook. If you like a Kindle or a tablet kind of reading of a book, you can do that too. And then on my music side, on the other side of my webpage, you'll see a picture of my CD of Rachel's song. And right underneath it, guess what? There's a link that says buy now from Amazon.com. So you click on that and it'll take you to the page where you can either buy the CD if you still have a CD player, and that's another issue. I don't know what's happening with music, but even CD players are going away. But anyway, you can buy a CD. You can download the music from my album, that album, or the other albums, or you can stream the music if you're an Amazon Music, Amazon Music subscriber. So there's different ways to get the music there. But the one thing that I want everybody that's listening to this, remember, go to my website, and right in the middle, about where my chin is here, is a link that says play Rachel's song. And I want you to click on that link, and what you will hear is the original demo recording that I got made of Rachel's song back in 1986. It's not been altered, not been remixed, not been re-edited or anything. It's the original recording, the way I heard it first time in the studio in 1986. And that's Rachel's song. You can actually download it, download the MP3 if you want to. And that's free.
Where it all started.
That's where it all started. And so go there and check it out. You send me an email. There's my email address at the bottom of the page. It's at dave@combsmusic.com. And And also the stories of the guidepost article is on my website. There's a link up at the top that you can find the guidepost article.
Fantastic.
But it's real simple, combsmusic.com.
Thank you so much, Dave, for being here. Your story is phenomenal. I absolutely love it. You were the pioneer doing all of this before. Nowadays, we all think, oh, I can run my own business and do my own thing and make millions off of my art. You were doing it back in the day. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Well, thank you, Ray, for having me. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Hey, Ray here again. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcasting platform. Want to be a guest on the show or know someone who has an amazing story of entrepreneurship? Apply on our website at chironconsulting.us/podcast.